It is a huge honor today to be podcast interviewing one of my favorite dental attorneys, Phil Bogart, partner of the law firm of Whiteford, Taylor, Preston, and chair of dental practices group at WTPlaw.com. So Whiteford, Taylor, Preston, law.com.
Yes.
Over the years, Phil has represented numerous dental practices and gained valuable knowledge about the unique needs facing general dentists, oral and maxillofacial surgeons, pediatric dentists, orthodontists, endodontists, and periodontists in business transactions and situations they encounter during the lifetime of their practices. He assists dental practices clients in structuring, negotiating, and documenting employee arrangements, partnership arrangements, acquisitions, separations, and sales. Phil is a regular contributor to publications and websites that cover dental office management and offers resources for dentists. He also frequently addresses dental students at the University of Maryland School of Dentistry in Baltimore and the Howard University College of Dentistry in Washington, D.C., helping them to prepare for legal issues they may encounter upon graduation. Did you know that Howard University was actually named after me?
Oh.
Just keep saying that to people, and especially the young dental students. They might believe it because most people from Howard University don't even know who the Howard was. So when will a dentist need a lawyer?
Well, that's a great question. I will tell you that dentists that read Dentaltown need a lawyer much less, because I have found, and everyone says this, Dentaltown is such an amazing resource for people. And so when I get a client that reads Dentaltown, they already know a lot of what I tell them, which is really nice. It's a lot easier for me to work with well-educated dentists. But I would say that the first challenge will be when they have their first employment agreement that they will get while they're in school, or maybe right after they finish school, and usually that's when a dentist has no money, and so many times dentists have kind of tried to skip this step and not hire an attorney because they're afraid of the cost. But what your first agreement says can really dictate your future because of the non-compete. Now, if you live in a place like California, or another state that they don't have non-competes for employees, it may be a bit easier to skip the step. But before you sign your first agreement, you should have a lawyer involved. Because of that, I have tried to keep my fees down to a minimum. Because I know dentists out of school don't want to spend any money on a lawyer, and I don't blame them. But I've tried to keep my fee down to a minimum. I mean, my partners require me to charge something, but I have some nice packages for students that don't have the money to pay. Because whether they can leave the first job and go elsewhere, will change their entire career, and whether they have to move to a different city, for example.
So you're saying California there's no non-compete clauses in California?
For employees.
For employees?
That's correct. That's correct. And in some other states as well, I think.
But what about for an independent contractor?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't believe they're permitted either for them. And so it gives the employee a lot more latitude to make a decision. There are still some restrictions on them, but they have a lot of freedom.
There's about 30... I don't like the term corporate dentist because usually the people, usually most dentists are incorporated. I mean, most of them, I bet more are incorporated than not incorporated.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about big box dentistry that has 50 locations or more. There's about 30 chains. So I say there's 30 chains, big box dentistry, 50 offices or more, multiple states, and they're about 14% of the market. A lot of dental students ask in every school that when you go apply for a job with them, they say, oh, by the way, this employee contract is non-negotiable, so don't go get a lawyer and try to make changes because this is the contract we have for every employee that works here, and we don't play that game. Is that true or false?
That's a great question. It really depends upon where you are. I mean, if you're in Phoenix, Arizona, maybe you don't have too much leverage, but if you are filling a spot that's needed, especially for a specialist, you can have some leverage. But I will say that it's hard to negotiate them, but it's good to try. I mean, if you can change a 5-mile non-compete to a 4-mile non-compete, that can make a huge difference. And so sometimes I'm able to change the documents. But Howard, sometimes it's about educating the dentist. Even if it's not negotiable, it's important to know what these 30 pages say. Many times they're surprised that when they leave, if they don't give the right notice, they don't give 30, 60, 90 days notice, they have to pay like $1,000 a day. And so they're just shocked when they hear about what the contract says. Even if we're not able to negotiate a lot of the terms, at the very least, the dentist goes in as an educated consumer. But I'm always surprised about how flexible they can be, and sometimes sometimes it can help a lot. But you never know till you try. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think the internet has changed the millennials and the Generation Xers as opposed to a 53-year-old baby boomer like me, because, every time they go to a website, it says, accept the terms and conditions. And so that their mindset is you just hit accept. I mean, what percent of the kids hitting accept on the terms and conditions to join Facebook or Snapchat or Pinterest or any of these websites? What percent of them do you think read it?
I mean, you're right. I mean, and I don't read it, so I'm guilty as charged. You're absolutely right. Now, I'm curious, when you had your first job back when you were an associate 10, 15 years ago, did you hire a lawyer to look at your first contract?
No.
And did it come back and bite you, or you were safe?
Well, I got out of school May 11. I had my office opening up September 21. So I was in Phoenix, which, takes you an hour to drive across town. I knew no one would hire me for 4 months by me. So I drove to the other side of town and was telling them I just need a job for 4 months. And they were all laughing. They're like, you're not going to have your office open in 4 months. You'll be here for years.
Wow.
But back then, the contracts, that was 1987. The contracts were like a page long. So when they gave you the contract, you just sat down and read it right in front of them, and and a handshake. So what fills your day? I mean, we're all dentists. We're drilling, filling, billing. You're the one seeing these outlier situations. What's coming across your desk? And let me throw. I don't know why I said that. Because I'm going by questions that people keep asking me. 6,000 dentists just graduated from dental school, and a lot of people. About a third of them have a dentist in their family tree. It's their dad, their mom, their uncle. A lot of them are going back to family, and and it's one of those things. It's kind of like asking for a prenuptial. I mean, come on, you're my dad. Come on, we're getting married. Saying, well, shouldn't we meet a lawyer and write a prenuptial? That's just kind of weird. So my question to you, do you think that if Sheila's graduating and she's going to go in with her dad, do you think she needs an associate contract, employee contract?
That's a great question. I think that the contract isn't necessarily only about what you go to court with. It's also like a roadmap. So let's make sure we all understand the rules of the game. How much will I be paid? When do I have to work? And most importantly, with these family practices, when do I become a partner, and how much will I pay to become a partner? Now, maybe dad doesn't mind if Susie pays next to nothing, but the siblings care because that's part of their inheritance that dad's giving away. And so a lot of times these roadmaps can be helpful between the child and the parent and with the siblings. Because if the siblings feel like the parent's not being treated fairly, it does not make for a friendly family discussion around Thanksgiving dinner. And so sometimes it's a way to kind of keep the peace. But I think it's always good to get kind of the rules of the game, in practice. Now, I could never have a contract with my wife because she would not sign it and she would probably divorce me. But if you had a contract with your wife and it talked about who does the dishes on Tuesday nights and who picks up the kids Saturday nights, and how we spend our money, wouldn't that make marriage a lot easier? And I'm not talking about a prenup. I'm talking about the rules of the game. Sometimes these agreements are just these are the ground rules. Now, do you need to go to a lawyer for that? Well, not necessarily, but sometimes a lawyer can kind of point out things or point out situations that you never would have thought of that before. I'll tell you a story that I learned so much about, and this happened a number of years ago. And I'm going to change the names to protect the innocent, but. Our client, let's call him Dr. Jerry Seinfeld. Are you a Seinfeld fan?
He just lectured at the big Cyril World event.
Oh, wow. He's great. In fact, I've been watching him on these new shows, coffee and cards with friends, and he's great. So anyway, our client was Jerry Seinfeld. He was an orthodontist out in Oklahoma. He was in business with his neighbor, who is, I'll give you a hint, every day he would knock on the door and he would say, Jerry. And then Jerry would open the door and say, hello, Newman. So Jerry was in business with Newman. Jerry was my client. So one day I'm driving down downtown Baltimore. I get a call. I remember it was a hot April, May, a number of years ago. And he says, Phil, you got to help me. Newman decided he wants out. So to give you a little background, Jerry and Newman were partners forever. They were in dental school together. They did their ortho program together. Their wives were best friends. In fact, when Newman's house burnt down, Newman moved in with Jerry into that small little Manhattan apartment. Anyway, they were the best of friends. The wives were best friends. They had a practice together. They had their own ortho practice together, and they also owned the building together. And so anyway, Jerry calls me up and says, Phil, you got to help me. Newman is leaving. He's leaving the practice. Apparently, Newman was jealous of Jerry after all these years, and Newman is leaving. So Newman rented space a couple blocks away in another facility. And get this is a true story. Newman also changed the website of the practice to add a link to Newman's new practice, which was a couple of blocks away. Newman also instructed the staff making appointments to have a separate book for Newman for all new patients that Newman would get, or new appointments would be in this separate book for the new office. And there's even more. So anyway, Jerry calls me and says, what should I do? So I said to Jerry, send me your partnership agreement that you have with Newman. Send me your employment agreements that you all have with the practice. Send me the agreement you have which describes the ownership of the real estate. And send me the lease you have with the real estate and the practice. And so I get a big box of documents, and the documents were prepared, but they were never signed, which was a disaster. This went to litigation, and tens and tens of thousands of dollars later, they finally got the thing resolved. But it was a mess. I was getting calls almost every day from staff asking me what they should do, because Jerry was telling them one thing, Newman was saying something else. Neither Jerry nor Newman were elected as president or vice president. There was no chain of command. There were no kind of corporate documents which reflected how to make decisions. And so it went to litigation. It was very, very expensive, but it finally resolved itself. And I will tell you that from time to time I check in with Jerry and things are going fine with him. But indeed, Newman moved a few blocks away with his own practice and took half the assets, and they had to litigate over how to share in the value of the practice, how to share in the value of the real estate. Without going into all the details, what happened was they got out of school 30 years earlier, they had no money, and they were best friends. Their wives were best friends. And they figured they could have a handshake between them. Well, they never signed the documents, and it cost them much, much more later on. So what's the cliche, pay me now, pay me later? Something like that. I mean, sometimes it's good to have the documents no matter what, just so you have them down the road, because in the beginning of any relationship, the interests are more aligned than they ever will be later on. And so even if you think it doesn't make sense, still get the documents in place, because you really never know. And this was a great story. I tell clients all the time about the need to have buy-sell agreements among partners, partnership agreements, leases between the property and the practice, and employment agreements, even for the owners, just so everyone kind of knows what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. And ultimately, documents among partners are kind of like exit strategies. They can serve as instructions about how to dissolve a partnership. And if they would have had those documents in place, they would have saved lots of money I mean, ultimately, the lawyers got the money because it went to litigation, which was just a shame. I mean, this is my profession, but I'd rather be paid to structure fair documents rather than be paid to go to court and litigate something.
So that's a great question because what percent of Americans do you think get divorced? What do you think the divorce rate is in America?
Oh, it's more than half, right?
Um, So when you get married, you have sex, you have children, you have holidays, you have all these social glues to hold you together. Now you're going to go marry a dentist and you're not having sex, you don't have children, you don't have all these parents and all these other reasons to keep it together. And they go in there and thinking that's a good idea. Why would you want a partnership? I mean, why wouldn't you just if you wanted to cover more hours, why wouldn't you own the office and hire an associate? I mean, I've owned my practice for 30 years and I've had dozen people want to buy in and be my partner. It's like, why would I want to marry you? It didn't even work out with my wife after 20 years. Why would I marry you? I just don't get it. And it seems like dentistry is perverted. There's so much media information. I mean, whenever I see a message, I always follow the money. And there's so many people speaking on behalf of things they're selling. And it seems like everybody that loves partnerships is selling them. But you get to see the other side of partnerships. Would you recommend that two best friends in dental school get married and start a dental office and be partners till death do us part?
Yeah, that's so. It's a great question. I have so many clients that are married to dentists, and it works. But you're right. I mean, I'll tell you the one time when it makes sense. It makes sense if you want to sell your practice, but you're 5 years out, 7 years away from selling it. If you wait till the last day and you sell practice, the price will be dictated based upon how much goodwill will stay with the practice. Because when you sell a practice, you're not really selling the chairs and the tables and the desks. Most value is goodwill. And people will pay goodwill based on whether they think they can keep the goodwill. Of course, goodwill is patient, or if you're a specialist, it's the referral sources. If you sell your practice on the day before you want to leave, there's only so much someone's going to pay you. But if you can sell half the practice now and bring someone on and slowly transition the goodwill over to the younger dentist or dental specialist, in the long run, you'll probably make a lot more because you can sell it for more because that buyer will really hold on to that goodwill because it's done the right way. I mean, if the goodwill transition happens over a number of years because of the partnership, more patients are likely to stay. And so that's the only time I think it makes sense to have a partnership, is if it's really a slow sale where the goodwill is slowly being transitioned over. This is especially true when you have specialists. I have a client that's an oral surgeon. I met her at one of the schools I spoke at. She's being hired by somebody that really wants to retire in 5 years from now. Now, it's hard to sell an oral surgery practice because the value, again, is the goodwill. It's the referral sources. I don't know how much the oral surgeon will make if he sells it to leave tomorrow, but he's going to sell half now and half later. He's going to stay on with the place for 5 years, and the referral sources will stay on, hopefully, because it's being done the right way. And that oral surgeon is going to make more because the goodwill really was transitioned in a way that was effective.
Isn't it interesting how physicians can't sell their goodwill like dentists? Only dentists and vets and podiatrists and chiropractors can sell their practice like dentists do. Physicians can't sell their practice. They can sell the charge to build out the rent, any of that, because if there's so much Medicaid, Medicare, Obamacare that anyone who opens up is already booked out 2 months in advance. They're not trying to grow a business the way insurance has made it in their life. It's any moron can set up anywhere and be booked.
Yeah.
There's so long of a line. But here's tell me if this is a good idea or scam. It seems like most dentists who say, I'm going to bring you in as associate, Phil. I like you. I liked your father, Humphrey Bogart, big fan of all of his shows. And right now, the office does $1 a year. I bring in Phil Bogart, and 5 years later, now the office is doing $2 million a year. And if you would have bought it when you walked in there, say it just sold at one-time revenue, and that's a crude, rude, horrible number because it should be based on earnings. Let's say the office did $1 in profit. You could have bought it for $1 in profit. But then you build it up for 5 years, and now it's twice as expensive. So now you have to buy what you just built with blood, sweat, and tears for 5 years. Do you see that often as going in there with an employee contract? Like you said with a prenuptial, you're having a roadmap. Like, what is this thing worth now? If you're going to sell in 5 years, how will we discover the formula? You know, how will it sell? Because you don't want to go in there and be on call and be joining the Rotaries and the Quanas and going to the PTA meetings and act like you're running for mayor and really build this up to $1 million practice, then turn around and say, oh, now you have to buy the $1 million practice. I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a great point. And, you know, as a lawyer, I can argue both sides. On the one hand, the goodwill is owned by the employer because the employer can say, yes, you built it over 5 years, but that's why I paid you. I paid you for that. Of course, the employee doesn't see it that way, so it really depends. At the end of the day, hopefully it won't matter because hopefully they'll do so well together that the purchase price won't really make a difference in the long run. What I care about most is that relationship staying intact, that they work well together, that they're teammates. If I get a great deal for the buyer, for the younger dentist or dental specialist, and he's great and he pays a very small price, I have a feeling the senior dentist is going to feel used and taken advantage of and probably resent what happened. We really need them both to be working on the same team. So it's got to be fair. We have to have a win-win situation where, you know, the senior dentist gets paid what he thinks he's worth, and the younger dentist doesn't feel like he or she was taken advantage of. So it's all about compromise. And there are ways to compromise in terms of the tax aspects of the deal. And so best case scenario is I work hand in hand with like a dental CPA. Of course, there's many dental CPAs on Dental Town. My favorite, of course, is my neighbor here, Tim Lott. Tim
He's your
does
neighbor?
Well, we're both in Baltimore.
Really?
Yeah, so I've gotten to know Tim and Tim's team over the last number of years. Tim's great.
So do you guys meet up with Ray Lewis and the three of you go out for a brew every once in a while?
Well, if that happens, I'm not the one. I'm not invited. I'm sure Tim does it without me.
He's my favorite NFL commentator, Ray Lewis.
Oh, is that right?
What a charismatic guy. Just love that guy.
Oh, he's a lot. He's also a sharp dresser.
Tim Lott is a genius, though, because the dentists, they know their bonding agents. They know everything about a root canal. They know the Krebs cycle. They know the periodic table, and God knows they know algebra and geometry and trig. But they never, ever know their numbers. You can ask them any number. What was your return on equity last year? No idea. What was your return on asset last year? No idea. How many incoming phone calls did you have last year? No idea. I mean, they just don't know their numbers. They take 4 to 12 PPO plans, and probably 40-50% of all the procedures they do on those plans, they lose money per unit on that cleaning, exam, and they don't even know it.
Right.
So Tim Lott, so that's a hell of a 1-2 punch.
I mean, he's great. You know, both sides need to get someone on their team like Tim. Tim can do both sides, or he can do one side, but have a CPA that understands the industry and understands the practice to put together a win-win. I tell you, I mean, so many times I get calls from people. They tell me that they have been working for the practice for 8-9 years, and they were promised equity, and they never got equity. So I always say to them, well, show me the contract, and there's no contract. Or the contract has some feel-good language about becoming partners. Again, it's about the roadmap. You get the advice early on, but having Tim on your side or someone like Tim is great. It's not just about the numbers and about the price. It's also about the tax aspects of it. And there's lots of threads about this on Dental Town, but there are smart ways to buy into a practice, and there's ways that are not smart, and there are ways to kind of minimize your taxes. And so make sure when you do it, I tell my clients, do it with a tax advisor, because it's not just about the dollar amounts.
Well, I don't. So why would people want to pay money for a CPA and a lawyer when you get this advice from free from a tooth fairy riding a unicorn? I mean, wouldn't that just be a much better deal? So everybody listening to you right now, they know what they do. They're going in there and checking hygiene, doing fillings and crowns and root canals. What are common problems? Like in MBA school, they always talked about case studies. Who's calling you? What are their problems? What problems are you fixing all day? What is your 80-20 rule? What is your common phone call? What are you dealing with all day?
Half of my practice is dental, and then the other half is either medical or just general business. And I actually made a list of kind of what I have to do today, what I'm in the middle of doing today. Because I speak at some of the local schools, I get a fair amount of just associate agreements to review for new grads. So I might spend an hour doing that. I'm also helping a couple practices presently start up new practices. And so with that involves lease negotiations, choice of entity, assisting with the loan financing and picking the right deal for that. In one situation I have, she did not hire me until after she signed her non-compete. She's in Northern Virginia, which is saturated with some great dentists out there, and she has like a 10-mile non-compete. And so we're trying to figure out a way for her to open the office within the 10 miles. And so we're working together to figure out if there's a way to kind of strategize and try to get the mileage reduced, either by going to court, which is a last resort, or by negotiations with the employer. And so part of my day also is just working with new practice owners. I also have a couple acquisitions at various levels of where we are in the transaction. I mean, I represent more buyers than sellers, because I really want to have that client for many years in the future, and so I rather work with the people closer kind of to my age. And then I also have a couple practices I'm working with, things that have come up after they bought the practice. And one, it might be an employment issue with some staff, and they're trying to avoid fallout from a discrimination case against the practice. Another one involves fighting with the seller of the practice over some receivables, because maybe the contract wasn't as clear as it should have been about collecting the receivables. And then the last deal I'm working on today is kind of gratifying. A couple of years ago, I helped this woman sell her practice, and she rented out the condo to the buyer, and now she's ready to actually sell the condo to the buyer. And so we're working on that as well. And so it's a nice mix. Lawyers are salespeople, just like dentists. We do a fair amount of work to spread the goodwill, to educate the public, and try to get my name out there. And so a fair amount of writing and these types of activities also kind of top off the day. It's busy because I have 5 kids at home, thank God, and so trying to find time to do the work and do the business development and see the kids and make my wife happy. It
How
can be
old are your
challenging.
kids?
From 16 down to 6.
Oh my God. When my kids were that age, I got 4 boys. They're
Yeah.
21, 23, 25, 27. And when they were little, I used to be so sad that they would grow up, and I just thought that
Yeah.
was going to be a bad thing because it was so awesome then. And every year is just better. I'm
Right.
having more fun with my boys from 21 to 27. And when they were, I had 4 boys in 60 months. And when they were like all under 5, I used to just was so sad that day would come to an end. But it's actually 10 times more fun now. I'm going to talk about a lot of common complaints I hear on Dental Town. This associate worked for me for 2 years and then decided to leave and go set up their own. But they're contacting the patients, and they think that's just horrible. You were working for me, and the last 2 or 3 months before you left, you were computer downloading all their names, everything. Now you're contacting all of my patients, telling them that you're now opening up your own business outside of the non-compete clause, say 5 miles. but they're 5.5 miles away and they're contacting all your patients. What are your thoughts on that?
The first thing I do is say, let me see the contract, because if the contract was written well, it will say you may not solicit patients, whether they're in the radius or not within the radius. It should say that. If it doesn't, state law may help anyway. If the dentist took a copy of the data with them. I tell you, I see it a lot with specialists. Sometimes even the employers can be very cost conscious, and they hire an orthodontist or an oral surgeon or a periodontist. They hire them, and the owner of the practice just wants to download a form from the internet, or they want to use their own form. And sometimes the employer is kind of cheap and they don't structure it the right way. And so every so often, I'll get a call from a specialist, and the associate left, and the associate's not soliciting patients. The associate is soliciting the referral sources, the GPs trying to get their work, or the if it's an orthodontist, there's the associate soliciting, the pediatric dentists. And again, I say, let me see your contract. And another little tip for your listeners: if you're a specialist and you have an employment agreement, make sure it says that the associate may not solicit referral sources. That's a big one for a specialist, obviously. And so the first step is always to check on the contract. However, if patients find the doctor on their own, patients find out where the dentist is going, they're free to go there, because the law wants patients to have a freedom of choice. And so you can't stop the dentist from treating their patients. And in fact, you have to check the local law. But if a patient wants to go elsewhere and the patient wants the records, of course they tell their old practice to send the records over. They also can ask the practice where the associate went. Oh, Dr. Smith's no longer there? Well, where did Dr. Smith go? And in most situations, the practice must inform the patient where they went. Again, it's the freedom of the practice.
Can't you just abbreviate and say, I'm not sure, he's in rehab somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where he went. But here's the next deal: is it true or false? Let's say the contract says you can't solicit patients, but then they do solicit patients. Is it true that the contract has to have a penalty? Because if you put it and said there and said, okay, Phil, you signed a contract with Howard that you can't solicit patients, but you did solicit patients. I mean, what do you want me to do? Am I going to give you a spanking? Am I going to give you a timeout? Should it be more specific and say, Phil, if you solicit my patients, here's the exact penalty, you owe me X dollars, or how does that work?
I think that's a great idea. It really depends upon the state. I will tell you that I'm a barred attorney in Maryland. We have offices in D.C., in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and we have attorneys barred in many other states, Florida, Massachusetts, etc. But if I'm looking at an employment agreement, I need someone barred in that state, because every state is different. And so in some states, you really need to have that, or having what we call liquidated damages helps. And so it's very important to make sure whoever prepares your agreement to understand the state law. Otherwise, it just depends. So you have to know what state law would say on that situation. I mean, Howard, when you hired associates, what kind of non-compete did you put in there?
I give them 5 years, 5 miles.
And did they ever try to,
no, because I put in specific damages. If you break that, you will write me a check for $50,000 in 30 days. So, so if it's really worth it, I mean, if they really want to go across the street, if it's worth $50,000 to them, because so many of the young dentists, they just really think they're all that, and they don't realize that so many people have been going to this office. It's convenient, it's close, their family goes there. There's, a mom, dad, kids, whatever, and they think just because the patient smiled and liked and they get along that they're gonna follow them 5 miles away. So to me, it's just a business. I mean, if you really want to leave and go across the street, that's cool, just write me a check.
I mean, that helps. I mean, every so often I'll get a call from someone and we'll analyze the situation and we'll realize the associate is wrong and we could sue them. But to sue them, it's going to cost $20,000 to sue them. Who knows whether the judge is going to see it our way or not. So sometimes I just try to be practical. Like, you know what? Don't give the law firm $20,000. Use the $20,000 for your own marketing. Make your practice better and more popular. Sometimes, you may be right and the law may be on your side, but you have to be practical and maybe it makes sense not to go after the patient.
Tell me, what are when you're assisting people buying and selling practices, what are common mistakes you see on the buying and the selling of a practice?
I think the non-compete is big. It's very big. When you buy a practice, when you buy a practice, lately I've had a lot of issues with redos. You buy a practice and the seller leaves and someone comes in complaining about the work. Who does the work? Who pays for the work?
That's a huge deal, because some of these guys say that the contract will be like, well, okay, Phil, I'm buying your practice. And if any of your patients come in and redo the work, how do you want to do that? And then Phil says, well, I'll pay half, you pay half. Well, now you just gave him a 50% off PPO. So they're just redoing the big cases, the bridges, they're just redoing all this stuff. And some of these dentists are getting shafted. So when you give your, when you sell your office, if you give the buyer some incentive to find anything wrong with your work, you're incentivizing a nightmare.
It's so true, and every time I have a situation, I kind of tweak my contracts a little bit to address it. But there's no perfect solution. If the seller is with the practice, at least they can do the work and pay for supplies. But if the seller is gone, a lot of times, it's who knows whether even a redo needs to be done. I mean, sometimes the buyer can be a perfectionist. And
I hate to be that grandpa. I mean, I'm a grandpa. My granddaughter, Taylor Marie, is 4 years old, and I'm starting to realize I'm turning into that old crotchety fart grandpa where it was just better back in the day. But I remember back in the day, the dentist would own their dental office, land and building, and say that was worth, 200 grand. And then they would have a practice in there, and they would sell that for 200 grand to a new associate, but they would carry. You wouldn't go through banks. So the interest on that $200,000 over 7 years, at 10% was $200,000. So they'd actually get 3 times the value of the practice, because they sold the practice for 200, but they carried it for 7 years at 10%, which gave them skin in the game. So they're all going to church or the grocery store saying, oh yeah, that new guy, Phil, he is great. And then if there's some issue about rework or whatever, he can go in there and redo it himself or whatever. And then when you paid off the practice, which was 200, and the seller made another 200 interest. Now you have the third part, you have the building. So now you've done paying the practice. You say, hey Phil, do you want to be a landless peasant squatter your whole life, or do you want to be a good man and buy this land and building? And I just thought it was so much better. But then the big bank said, oh, we want that finance money. So now the doctor is, buying is going through some big bank that wants the loan. And then the guy who sold just takes the check and leaves town. So he's not out there spreading the goodwill. And I don't know. I just think it was a lot better in the 70s and the 80s than it is in 2016. I think that 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I mean, if I was a young kid and got to buy a practice, I was going to buy your practice. Yeah, I'd want you to have skin in the game. I'd say no, man, because some of these guys will sell a practice for $1 million to some punk ass kid who's got a rich cosigner, and they go in there and they don't have any of the skill sets. The guy was doing all this complicated TMG and full mouth rehab and all this stuff. And the kid buys $1 million office, produces $1 million a year, and the first year it drops to like 650. And a lot of them go bankrupt after 2 years. The seller doesn't care. They're already moved to San Diego and got a boat. This kid's morally depressed, and he's ruined his credit. And I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of disasters. I like the seller to have skin in the game. But if I was a dentist, I'd own the land and building. I'd own the practice. I'd carry the paper. Yeah. It's a win-win situation. You don't have all these rework stuff like that. And then when it's done, the number one variable of real estate is to have a tenant. Well, dude, you got a captive business here. You got all these build-outs. You really want to negotiate on the price and go find another land, building, architectural fees, build it out, move everything. I mean, What a pain in the ass. So now you got a captive buyer where you say,
Right.
dude, the building's 200,000 and it might only be worth 175 or 165, but it's like, I'm not going to move over
Yeah,
25
right.
grand. And the person is a doctor, a successful doctor. So it's all good.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a couple
And then
practices
you
right.
could carry the interest on the building for another 7 years. So make
Right.
it a 4X move.
Right. It's true. I mean, so often the sell price isn't what the seller thought it would be, and they were kind of counting on their nest egg being the practice, and so often it's really not. They don't get as much as they think they're going to get, and their retirement has to come from somewhere. So it's very true. Every so often, and actually a couple of times lately, I come across practices that are in houses where the dentist lives in the house, which has a whole host of other issues of finding a buyer that not only wants to buy the practice but wants to buy the house. You probably saw a lot back when you got started. These kind of, I guess, family-owned practices in the home.
Well, what Chipotle? What was Chipotle's new play on Asian food? Shop House. So
Okay.
when you go to so Chipotle's one of the strangest, most rarest companies where it was a successful food franchise for like 20 years, and they decided to start another franchise and jump from Mexican to Chinese food, and they called it Shop House because in Asia, most businesses are on the first floor and you live upstairs. Now,
Right.
some states that's illegal. You can't do it, but it's one of those illegal, unenforceable things where
Sure.
it never hardly comes up. But in the North Coast, you know Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook.
Yep.
His dad's a dentist, Ed Zuckerberg,
Wow.
and about 10 minutes from Manhattan, he had that. The office was on the first floor. The family quarters were on the second floor, and the bedrooms were up on the third floor. And so it's kind of a Northeast phenomenon, but like I'm not aware of any of it in Arizona,
Yeah.
Kansas, but it was a Northeast thing. But
Interesting. Interesting. I can't. I mean, I love my family. I love my wife. Today's my 18th anniversary, actually, and I love my kids. But I would have trouble working in my house. I think it's nice to be able to kind of go to an office and do my work and then come home. I don't know. I would have trouble having a practice in my own home.
yeah, it's I think the game changer on the home is going to be the driverless car by Google because you really can't get anything done at your house if you got a spouse and 5 kids running around. And then you
Yeah.
go to the office and everybody from every cubicle wants to come by and say, hi, how you doing? What'd you do last night?
Yeah.
How's your wife and 5 kids? And it's so much cheaper in the rural. And I think when these cars get driverless and it just turns into an electric box and you get on your box and you sit in your desk and you have your
Yeah.
computer and you're uninterrupted and you're on Wi-Fi and cellular, I think people won't even care if they're 2 or 3 hours from work because that'll be the only 2 to 3 hours of uninterrupted time they get.
Yeah.
And they'll get in their
Interesting.
car. And it's like no family. And then when they get to work, it's all the same social noise and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
I have a very long leash with my employees at Dental Town, and I just tell them, if you want to work from home, knock yourself out because I get 100 times more done at home than coming in here and saying hi to 50 different people.
Right.
So I think it's going to be a big change of role. And I'm going to ask you another question. The young kids, we just graduated 6,000 dental students in the United States from 56 schools a month ago, and a lot of them are saying, should I go to specialty school? And I thought it'd be interesting from a legal perspective. And you do a lot of business law and contract laws of general dentistry versus the 9 specialties. Do you think any of the specialties have it easier or worth the extra time and money where you sit there and say, these guys got a much better gig going on?
Well, if you ask my kids what they should be when they grow up, I tell them do not go to law school. I tell them go to dental school, become a specialist. I mean, they know what I think. I listen. The grass may be greener on the other side, and I love the practice of law. But it seems to me like you have orthodontists that maybe work 3-4 times a week, 3 or 4 times days a week rather. And of course they didn't start out that way when they got out of school. But it seems like the lifestyle of some of these specialists is pretty pretty enticing. I mean, do you agree with that? Do you think the specialists have it easier or more free time?
Well, there's 9 specialists. I mean,
Yeah,
public
yeah.
health isn't that, but you don't go into public health at the Indian Public Health Service for money. But do you think orthodontists, oral surgeons, endodontists, periodontists, pediatric dentists, you think they make more money with less effort than the general dentist?
I think it's true probably for orthodontists and maybe oral surgeons. I'm not sure about the others. Um, you mentioned the other specialists. The last couple of years, I've come across other prosthodontists looking to either buy or sell practices, and I had clients on both ends of it. And it was very interesting to see how I had one client that was a prosthodontist who bought a general dentistry practice, and I had a prosthodontist who sold his practice and could not find the prosthodontist to buy the practice. He sold it to a general practice. I mean, what's the future of that specialist? I mean, what happens to a prosthodontics 10 years down the road? I mean, how will that change?
Prosthodontics is interesting. In most rural markets, if they start placing implants, they lose all their referrals. Their referrals are coming from oral surgeons, periodontists. So if you're just doing straight prost, I see lucrative deals, and I think a lot of as cases get bigger and bigger, like I'll tell you, like the 4 on the floor, Clear Choice does about 18,000 arches a year for 25 grand. Those are not simple cases. So a lot of these dentists, they send in 96% of their crowns are done one tooth at a time, and sometimes what looks like a big lucrative case, there's a lot of dentists who say, I don't even know how to deal with this, or these complex attachments and partials and things like that. So I think they're doing good, but I think that what my perception is on specialists, especially in the Phoenix market, is the person who's warm and fuzzy and golfs and has the annual Christmas party, and the patients come back and say, God, I love Phil Bogart, that they just crush it. And the ones that are just like technically perfect specialists who just do everything right and have the personality to live in the closet, they don't do well at all. So no matter what business you're in, law, orthodontics, whatever, it just doesn't matter. We're all in the people business. And if you can't manage if you can't make your referrals feel good, they don't refer. If you can't make your staff feel good, they don't stay. If you can't make your patients feel good, they don't come. It's not what you do, it's how you make people feel. And if you're an asshole and you're always talking down to people, what was that joke about talking down? A lot of people say I'm condescending and talk down to people. No, a lot of people say I'm condescending. Condescending means, Phil, is when you're talking down to someone. I thought that was a funny joke. Remember that joke? That was a great joke that I completely ruined and butchered. But yeah, so it just comes into the feeling. I mean, the natural selection of a dentist is that, and a lawyer and a physician, that if you went to where I went, Creighton University, and you joined a frat and you had a girlfriend and you had a well-rounded life and you went out a couple nights a week and you made A's, B's, and C's, you never would have gotten to Creighton Med School, Creighton Law School, Creighton Dent School. But if you were a complete nerd geek and lived in the libraries and aced it, now you're an MD without a personality, you're a lawyer without a personality, you're a dentist without a personality, and most physicians and dentists became physicians and dentists because they didn't have enough personality to become an accountant. And so it's the deans. And there is one dean who's really been working on this named Jack Dillenberg. And Jack Dillenberg of AT Still Up he says, I'd rather have a warm and fuzzy, well-rounded guy with a great heart who made A's, B's, and C's than these 4.0 library freaks that every school wants. And then those schools are always worried about their ranking. So that's, like U.S. News and World Report wants to know everybody's GPA and their test skills. U.S. News and World Report, I mean, they're the problem. The problem is, who cares if you're a great lawyer? If you can't communicate with your client and you're going to talk bad to them and condescending and make them feel bad and dirty and shameful, they're probably not going to come back, let alone refer you a friend. And we're just all in the people business. And I noticed this in this election. We never talk about religion, sex, politics, violence, but this Republican candidate In 1980, Ronald Reagan was just making everybody believe again and have faith, and he was really talking everybody up. But this Republican guy, Trump, is saying, I'm going to make America great again, while he's being mean and condescending and making so many people feel down and bad. I mean,
it's funny you should say that. I'm just going to step away from my computer for a second. I was at a dental show a few months ago, and I got this hat.
Making dentistry great again. Oh my God, I so want that hat. Where did you get that?
I forget who gave it away, but it was one of the vendors. They only had a few of them, and for some reason, nobody was taking the hats. But anyway, so just so your viewers say, it's a red hat. It's or the people listening rather, so you know what we're talking about. It's a red hat. It's the same text as "Making America Great Again." It says "Making Dentistry Great Again," and I just had this on my shelf, just kind of looking at me. And you're so right. So Howard, if you have a dentist who went to Harvard and has been practicing for 10 years, is ready to buy a practice, and he's got or she's got no personality, but now it's time to become best friends with all the referral sources. How do you get a personality? How do you become that gregarious person that everyone loves?
I think you go to Dale Carnegie courses. I think you can read books. I mean, look at the great. I mean, look at Meryl Streep, who I think is the greatest actor of all time, not actress or who man or woman or transgender, who would beat Meryl Streep? She can beat anybody. In fact, I've seen talk deals where there'll be a movie with another famous actress, and the producer is like, well, he was all stressed out. Well, who wants this character and who wants that character? And the other lady was next to Meryl Streep, and she says, I told Meryl, I said, I just can't be that actor, and I really, really want this one, but it's a bigger part. And Meryl says, I don't care. I'm a professional. I'll play anybody. I mean, that's the challenge. I mean, she'll be a murderer, she'll be a witch, she'll be a lovely, a drunk, a drug addict. It doesn't matter. And gosh dang, if these guys can get an Oscar for playing a person they aren't even, or an historical figure, or look at the guy who played Gandhi for an hour and a half. You actually thought he was Gandhi. So you just have to, at Disneyland they call it on stage, off stage. So those characters, when they're dressed up like Goofy and Mickey and Minnie, they can't talk because. What if you're from Korea and Minnie Mouse always spoke Korean and then he said something in English? It just popped the little kid's bubble. So they can't talk. They're in uniform. They're on stage. And they have thousands of little hidden exit doors where they can break through, rip off their mask, go to the bathroom, drink water. And when you're in the dental office, when you walk through that door, you're on stage. You're on stage for your staff. You're on stage for your patients. And I think introverts are actually better technical actors than extroverts, because it's hard to shut up an extrovert from all the things they need to turn off, whether it be crude, rude jokes or talking politics or religion or violence or whatever. But an introvert is actually reading a script and saying, okay, this is what makes people feel warm and fuzzy for my assistant and my hygienist and my patient and all that stuff. So yeah, I'd start with Dale Carnegie. Because then you're going to be with a bunch of like-minded people who are all the same thing. They're entering the professional LinkedIn world, and they're trying to be a better, warm and fuzzy personality.
Yeah. That's good advice.
And there's also on the lawsuits. I mean, you don't do medical malpractice, but on the lawsuit thing, I mean, there's just study after study after study that the lawsuits have the highest correlation to the patient did not like the doctor. They didn't want to communicate. They didn't want to talk. They felt they didn't know what to do. So they called a lawyer. But the person who's open, who has an open door that they liked and said, Phil, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but I'm really not happy. I mean, it doesn't match my other tooth. You said this crown it doesn't match and I'm not happy. If she likes you, she can tell you that. Then you can sit there and say, well, here's your options. I can redo it for free. I'll give you your money back, and you go to my buddy Sam across the street and let him try. But if they don't like you, if they can't communicate, they can't talk to you, they sue. And so much of this, like these kids they want to get married. I mean, I don't even know why you would even get married until you needed until you decided you were going to start a family. I mean, why would you get lawyers involved in legal contracts and marriage? I mean, I understand marriage is because these kids are 25-year projects. And but I don't think you should get a job without being comfortable to talk and put it in writing and get a friendly attorney involved. And so let me end on this. What threads on Dental Town do you think strike a chord with you, or memorable, or think that the listeners should go and read? So we have 50 forums, and one of them is legal.
I think it's a good forum, but if you're in school and you're thinking about your first job, read the one on associates. I mean, I think the dental schools should make this required reading. I mean, it is some great information there. Lots of case studies of associateships that went well, didn't go well, and you're getting free advice from some great folks.
Now, what's that under? Is that under legal, or what is?
I'm not sure. It might be under transitions.
Okay, I'm under law. I'm in. Okay, I don't see transitions.
Because I just go every day.
Practice transitions.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's under practice transitions. There's Associates Corner, Life After Dentistry, Partnerships and Associates, Practice Acquisitions, Practice Sales, Practice Startups, Retirement Planning. So you're saying under Practice Acquisitions or Associates Corner?
Both are terrific. I mean, just today I read a post of associate that has 3 different offers, and the discussion is which offer's the best.
Was that under Associates Corner?
I think so. I'm not sure, but and so read those, because you'll be better informed, and you're getting free legal, free accounting advice from lots of experts, really. If you're going to go buy a practice, you can put the specs of the practice online, and you're going to get all these people pick it apart, lawyers and CPAs and practitioners, and so just some great information.
And
there.
I want to say something about that. So there's 7,300,000,000 people. 100,000 die every day, and you didn't even know their name, and another 100 plus are born. And every dentist, not being transparent is the human condition. Everything's private, everything's a secret, and success is so counterintuitive. And the people that realize that there's 2 million dentists on Earth, and when 2 million woke up today, not one of them was thinking about you. So why don't you just go? And they're like, well, I don't want to say the city I'm in, or I don't want to say. Well, then you're just going to get these general one-liners. But the counterintuitive dentists that go on there and say, hey, my name's Phil Bogart, and I'm in Baltimore, Maryland, and I got 3 offers, and here's the 3, just completely transparent. Now they got lawyers like you, Tim Lott. They got all these amazing minds picking it apart for free, while educating everybody, while everyone else. So you got to be willing. Success in 2016, you got to be willing to fly above the radar. And the older generation, everything's private. That's why they hate the government. They hate competition. They hate everything. They just want to live in a bubble. But in 2016, your iPhone, every time you go to the store, your iPhone's moving from cell tower to cell tower. The phone company knows where you are. The government knows where you are. They got every text. I was in a 3-week, gosh darn, jury duty, and I couldn't believe it. Usually you get out of there by noon or 1. They send you home, and gosh darn it, they called me, and it was 3 weeks, and it was a really bad crime. It was a really bad boy, and I don't want to get into the specifics. It was just vulgar and gross, but it was amazing how they were pulling up the text and the voice phone call from years back. You said, well, I never met Howard, and they start playing a conversation of you and Howard talking on the phone. And I was like, wow. I was sitting there like, so nothing there. You have no privacy whatsoever. So get on Dental Town. Whoever climbs up the pole the highest and screams the loudest is going to get all the most attention to their problem. And get out there and say, hey, I'm at a fork in the road. I'm exactly right here. Here's exactly the decision at hand. And then you have 250,000 dentists and dental professionals on Dental Town for free, just trying to help you. It's the share thank you economy, and they're just feeling better by just saying, dude, I'd go left, I would not go right, and here's my 3 reasons. And
it's great. The mobile app is terrific. Most of my time on is on my iPhone, and it's very user friendly. I mean, it's been upgraded recently, I believe, to be able to watch more courses. and it's just user friendly. And I mentioned Tim Lott, Jason Wood, of course, is another superstar. I don't need to tell you who Jason is, but he's also a lawyer. He's on the West Coast, and he just is very generous with his knowledge. And it's just a great education for anyone that wants to learn. I mean, so the first step for anyone is look on Dental Town. It's a great resource for the community.
So what if one of my homies wants to ask you a question? How do they contact Phil Bogart? Or should they just call your dad Humphrey and ask him? Or is he, how is old Humphrey Bogart doing?
He's good. I finally saw the Maltese Falcon just a few weeks ago. After all these years, what a great! Because I saw Casablanca like tons of times. These are great. They don't make movies like Maltese Falcon any longer. I don't know.
Oh my God! I grew up with 5 sisters, so that's why I'm against democracy, because we'd always vote, and the NFL never won, the NBA never won. No sporting event ever won the Democratic vote between my 5 sisters and my mom, because my dad was always working. So I watched every gosh darn musical. I mean, I grew up on Sound of Music and Fiddler on the Roof and Humphrey Bogart and all that stuff. So yeah, so I'm a classic movie guy just because I grew up with 5 sisters. But how do people contact you?
Email is fine. I think my mobile number is even on my bio.
What's your email?
Bogart at WTPlaw.com. My office number is 410-347-8710. My mobile number is 410-852-9380. I get lots of Dental Town tire kickers, people that call and just kind of shoot the breeze and talk about what we offer. And then, I'm happy to talk and kind of see if we can help you. And if I can't, I can maybe point you in the right direction.
Was it really tough in college to be named Phil Bogart and people saying, Phil, quit bogarting that joint. Phil, don't bogart that.
Well, I'm too young, but my middle name is Morris, and so Philip Morris got me into
Are you serious,
trouble.
Philip Morris?
Yeah. My parents had a sense of humor.
Philip Morris, don't bogart that joint. That's your full official name?
Yes.
So where does that term come from? Don't bogart that joint. Where did that? Was that a movie or?
I think it was. I think it was. I don't.
Well, just remember this, kids. Let's end on this note, and I want to end on this note that business looks simple. I mean, it just looks simple. It looks like a chess game, but it looks like a checkers game. There's just red checkers and black checkers, and there's just a board 8x8. But when you start becoming really successful and start meeting really successful people, what appears just to be a simple checkers game is really a complex chess game. And it doesn't matter if all these laws and rules and tax write-offs and how do you depreciate the assets versus the blue sky, all that stuff. I don't get into. I don't care if it's right, wrong, whatever. That's the way chess is played. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say, well, why does the queen get to do this and the horse doesn't do this and the castle does this? You need a lawyer to tell you. And I don't waste my time, wishing that all the laws were different or is this way or that way. You need a lawyer to explain that, dude, this ain't checkers. This is chess. And you're moving these players like they're checkers, and it's going to be a big problem. And I've been in this game 3 decades, and I've seen a lot of disasters. I've seen a lot of dental offices that thought they were going down the highway 60, 70 miles an hour, and the next thing you know, they all wiped out for something that was very, very preventable. And I also think doctors and dentists and physicians, when they graduate, they have this inflated self-esteem that they know everything. And again, if you graduate an endodontist, you know a doctorate level amount of root canals, but you don't know shit about estate planning, law, real estate. You don't know almost anything of anything else. And by the way, that 2008 financial disaster, I mean, I could give you the names of 20 dentists just in my own state that were leveraged to the hilt in real estate. And it never occurred to them that market could go the other way. And I mean, and I watch these guys that were my age that spent 30 years of their life and productivity and whatever, lose everything and move into an apartment. Yep. And what was also really sad is how many of their marriages didn't make that collapse. And it's like, wow, you went from living, in North Scottsdale, like you're a rock star, and now you're in an apartment, and the first casualty of war was your best friend. So it's not checkers, it's chess. Find a good lawyer. Phil Bogart is an amazing lawyer. Phil, thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time, buddy.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.